Hi everyone, welcome to Rick's 23 Fifth Scale Models. My name is Rick. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. As you can see, I'm outside. Now what I'm talking about today is when it comes to painting your model, light is everything. So if you're indoors with fluorescent light or incandescent or different types of lighting effects, it's going to change your color. So in trying to always improve the quality of my product I produce, I started doing some research on colors. And I saw somebody on Facebook who took a series of color palettes, and what they did is they painted all these different model products on them, and they actually went to the actual vehicle with the correct color on it and did a side-by-side comparison. In their study, they did it in natural light, shade, they did it in indoors, different things like that, and you really could see the difference. So I started kind of thinking about it, thinking, I never was really happy with the colors only of the pigments on the Tamiya acrylics. I always felt there was something just not quite right about it, and after seeing this gentleman's study, I would agree. So what I did is I started doing some research and looking at kind of what he did and what other people were talking about, and realized there's some different products out there that would probably make me a little happier. And what I came up with was going with the Mr. Color brand paints. Now they have their NATO black variant here, and they have their NATO brown variant, but most importantly they have their NATO green, which isn't really a NATO green, it's a bronze grün or bronze green tint, and that looks, what I would say, a lot more accurate to an actual Bundeswehr NATO paint scheme for the European campaign. Lighting, like I said, is everything. So like when you look at an actual Bundeswehr hat, you can see how the light reflects here. Now indoors this colors look a lot different, and then when you look at a NATO black on this, it's going to look pretty accurate, but outdoors totally different. The other aspect is an acrylic reflects light a lot less than a lacquer. A lacquer gives a lot more of a reflection and a hint of a shinier. And although it, maybe not the effect you're looking for in the military campaign, they don't paint with acrylic paints on the tanks. They paint with a color that reflects light, and you get a more of a shine. All that having said, what I did is I just did a vehicle painting with these Mr. Color variants, and I wanted to show that how it looked in the lighting, and how much of a difference it made the model look in quality. So let's jump into that. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about is when you're painting these colors, the time you paint them in the year makes a big difference. Like right now it's summertime here in California, so it's hot, it's dry, so the paint's going to spray on differently and it's going to cure differently. Where in the winter time, where it's a lot higher humidity and it's colder, you're going to have a totally different effect. So everything I'm doing now, and I'll talk about it as I talk about it, is done during summertime. So you may have to adjust some of your variations of dilutions and pressures and dry times. So all those things being all those things being said, you need to kind of test your time of year, where you're at in the world, and all the effects to make it get the best quality for you. The other thing is, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, with the cost of models these days, if you're going to be using an airbrush and you don't already have one, spend the money to buy a nice one. Now that doesn't mean you go buy the most expensive airbrush out there, but get an airbrush that exceeds your needs, because as you use it, you're going to want to do more. So spend the money, take care of it. You will get thousands upon thousands of hours of use out of it. It'll probably never wear out as long as you take care of it and keep it clean, and your model quality will increase so much. There's so much I can do with an airbrush, and some of the people I see on YouTube, that the projects they're doing and using an airbrush to do, it's amazing effects. So anyway, most importantly, let's jump into the kit and start looking at it. Now the kit is a rye-filled SPZ Puma that I've done. Now I'm not really going to talk about the build because it's a pretty straightforward build, but I am going to jump into the paint preparations and the actual painting. So anyway, let's get started.
So first thing I'm going to do is prime the vehicle. Now the one thing I did do on this, which I kind of in retrospect should have done differently, is I used a light gray. Now although the product is great and it gave great results, with this model there's lots of detailed little deep parts, so when it came time to paint it took a lot longer to cover up the gray. So in the future with this kit I would use a darker color as the primer for that reason. The other thing I do when I'm painting is I'll hit it from different angles and do like 1/4 of the coat, turn it 90 degrees, do another coat, turn another 90 degrees, do another 90 coat, another 90 degrees, and do another coat. That'll give you the 100% coverage, but won't give overspray and won't get it in all the angles. So now it came time to paint the green. Now this was the first model I painted with this color, and I'm very, very happy with it. But what I will say is, normally I would have mixed it a lot thinner. Initially when I painted it, I mixed it at a 50-50, and the paint was too thin, so it took 2 coats. So I would definitely not thin it as much. But once again, I also did the same technique I do where I paint 25% and turn it 90 degrees and do another 25%. This gets pretty good coverage. The paint itself, very, very impressed with the quality and that. Dry time was pretty quick, not as fast as an acrylic, but definitely not bad for a lacquer. Very, very nice. And the smell wasn't real bad. Some of the lacquer's pretty toxic when you breathe it. This wasn't bad at all. Now when it came time to paint the camo pattern, I start with the brown. And one of the things I learned is I lower the PSI down and I remove the tip so that the needle is exposed. Now you have to be real careful you don't damage your airbrush, but this allows me to get a lot closer with a lot finer lines. And you can see here, it really does make the detail a lot easier to paint. Now with the lower PSI, you don't get the overspray. It's just a lot of finger control, paint volume, and air pressure. But if you take your time, you get great results. I'm very, very happy with this technique. Now when it came time to paint the black, I used the same technique. The black was a little bit more, wanted to get a little bit of gloss here and there just because of the darkness of it. So I had to be a lot more delicate with the not painting too much overspray. But definitely, once again, the lower PSI and real close with the tip off, you can get really quality fine lines down to less than 1 millimeter wide with very little overspray. The only thing about that is you've got to kind of go over the area a few times to get the color painted real thick and coverage, especially with the black. When it came time to paint the tracks, what I did is I initially primed them in Mr. Hobby's brown or mahogany. Now this gives a really nice shade, I think, for tracks. It works out really good. I'm going to take Tamiya NATO green and I'm just going to lightly dust, especially the sides here and there. You always see a little bit of overspray on this type of stuff from them painting the vehicle. And so I'm giving that effect, not an equal overspray, kind of blotchy to give the right effect. You have to do it at this stage before you do the rest of the stuff so that it works out right. You will see some green on like the rubber parts and that, but the parts that the road wheels run on get all shiny, so you don't want to mess those up. Next, I taped the edges, just exposing the area that the road wheel runs on. And I initially painted with a chrome silver. This definitely gives it the shiny. Then I'll take the smoke, which has a hint of an oily look to it, but it gives it a glossy, darker, and I'll spray it, fairly straight across, but I'll kind of blotch it here and there. It's to kind of create the dark and rubber look. From there, I'm going to take a sponge, and this is the type you'd get like with lead parts and little things would come in you used to see. It's a real fine sponge. What I'm doing is I'm putting just a little bit of black paint on it and I'm dabbing it. Now the idea here isn't to cover the entire pad up, but just enough to give it that kind of a beat up hint of a scuffed up look and cover just those parts. It's one of those things, take and just put a little bit of paint on and then kind of play with it, and then you'll see how it comes out. So I'm getting ready to paint it with the clear flat to seal everything up. Now the biggest thing here is to make sure you get all the dust and little things and lint and all that off of it. Initially I use a really fine brush to kind of dust everything, the bigger pieces, and loosen it. Then I will take an air can and spray it the same type you'd use for cleaning like a computer keyboard. From there I'm painting my gloss on to put the decals on. Now I'm just hitting the areas the decals going and then spreading out a little bit outside of that area so that it evenly blends. Then I'm going to start the decal installation process. Now the key here is to use clean water. I use distilled water, and then I'll soak the decal for about 30 seconds. From there I then will let it sit outside the water until it loosens up nicely. Once I've let the decal sit and dry really good, I'll take my Tamiya clear flat and I'll seal the entire model up really good. Once again, before you do this, make sure you do your cleanup process to make sure there's nothing on the vehicle, because once you spray it, everything will stick and be sealed in there. But I start covering the whole thing in a really liberal coat. Some people use a spray can for this. I like to use the airbrush in a mix. So it's not shown in this video, but what I did do is I did do 2 coats. What I do is I'll spray 1 coat, give it about a half hour to dry, and then I'll hit it with a 2nd coat. This generally gets a lot better coverage for the flat. So then it was time to do all the little fine detail painting using different colors. I might kind of have my own little regimen here depending on your personal preference of shades. Like the placarding, I use flat white. Then for all the turn signals and that, I initially like to use the translucent lacquers. They're getting harder and harder to find. So what I'm using now is I use just yellow paint, and white paint, and silver paint. And then I'll follow it up with the clear acrylic paint to give it the shiny look. A couple of coats of that generally will give the same effect. And it's not quite as much as the lacquer ones were, but like I said, they're getting harder and harder to find. But I'm real happy with the way it's turning out using that combination. You kind of see the process here as I go through it. So you will notice here that I did mess up the convoy placarding painting, so I had to redo that off camera. Just trying to video it and get the right angles just didn't work. But after repainting it, looked a lot nicer. It's pretty horrible right here, but that was easy to fix. One of the things on this vehicle, especially a lot of the European nations, because they drive them on the regular roads, they have a license plate, and they also have lots of turn signals and reflectors and things like that. You'll notice in combat or a lot of the training things, they use green tape to cover this stuff up. But it definitely, they need that stuff for the open road. Here you're seeing me use the clear acrylic to shine up a lot of the mirrors and reflectors and camera lenses and that.
Okay, so we're going to be outside now using true light. Now you can definitely see the difference here in how the sunlight reflects. This is the Mr. Hobby, and this would be Tamiya acrylic. Now both of them inside look really close, but once you get outside and you get the sun reflections, you can really start picking out the differences and what I think is a lot more authentic reflection. Now this is an acrylic and this is a lacquer. That does create an effect, but the concept is pretty much the same. You can kind of get an idea here of how it looks. Definitely a lot better quality in the finished product compared to the Tamiya as far as accuracy goes. But this is definitely a good representation of the two there. So now in summary, looking at the vehicle, you've got your tracks put on here. They have a slight weathering dust, which you're going to get no matter what. You can see the little blue lines here every so often marking the end of a track group. Once they put it together, you've got your reflector on the side, the turn signals up in the front. You can see the different effects there. You've got your cameras, your tail lights. You've got the electrical lines with the yellow tape up along there. License plate. Once again, here's more reflectors, your antenna. The different periscopes and cameras on the vehicle. The defensive systems up on the roof along with the sighting system, the side cameras. Once again, looking at the tracks. As I said before, this vehicle is more of a one at a demonstration or a show, so it's been cleaned up and made to look a lot nicer. It's not all grubby, dirty, and worn. They're looking to show it off here. You can also see inside here the sighting system with some of the warning placarding I added in there. There is a little bit of weathering up here, which you're going to see even on fairly freshly painted vehicles, but nothing over the top. So anyway, that's this kit. As far as the using that paint, I'm very impressed with it. It's definitely going to be my product I'm going to go to from now on. Any questions or comments, please reach out to me. Get me on Facebook. Get me in the chat of this video. You can email me. Please like, subscribe, please share. Don't forget to hit the bell. Anything you want to know, please reach out to me. Thank you for watching, everybody. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Shut up and sit down.